Hi, this is Kevin Deal. Today we're going to talk about the PrimaLuna Evolution 100 preamp. But before I go there, I want to talk about preamps in general. I'm going to say something that's really going to upset some of my friends that work in the industry, and that is this. Preamps are where the consumer gets gouged. I'm just going to say it. What does that mean? It means this. You can make a reasonably good, an okay tube preamp, retail it for about $1,500, and nobody would be the wiser. But what manufacturers do is they take that same smattering of parts and they put it in a big, pretty box, and they come up with a story, and then they charge you $4,000, $6,000, $8,000 for it. I find it to be unconscionable. Listen, it's harder to cheat with a power amp. It's harder to cheat with a power amp because power amps require bigger power supplies. A tube amplifier requires big output transformers in order to communicate bottom end, right? It's all about bandwidth, not power. In a preamp, you don't have to. There's no new preamp designs, period. And there's no such thing as, I saw this advertisement the other day. It said, oh, and our preamps operate in Class A. Well, of course they do, dum-dum. There's no such thing as a tube preamp or operating in anything but Class A. All of them do. And then I saw another ad from a company, and they talked about a patented power supply. So I looked up the patent, I looked at it, and I go, okay, what's this about? And it's about, this design is about pre-charging capacitors, keeping them charged so things can be handled better during times of duress and dynamics. But that is applicable maybe in a power amp. In preamps, it doesn't matter. Because in a preamp, they run in Class A, so the power demands, the current demands don't change that much. So this whole thing about pre-charging capacitors and it's fluff. It's all noise. You want to make a quiet power supply? Do what PrimaLuna did. Don't use cheap EI core or C core transformers. Use toroidal power transformers. And this company doesn't even, they use more than one toroidal. Listen, this preamp is dual mono. It's two preamps in one box, dual mono all the way to the power switch. What does that mean? There's two big, massive toroidal power transformers in here. Why do they use toroids? Well, they probably shouldn't because they're very expensive. But toroids have 90% less magnetic noise that can get into the front end of the system. And they're mechanically much, much quieter than regular transformers are. But PrimaLuna went even further. There's two transformers here. Both of them are sealed in a non-microphonic resin, then placed into a mu metal shield. It's expensive to do that. No one else does it. Go look at other manufacturers. Why do they do that? Because they want to keep the front end quiet. And it costs money to do that. But they did more than that. If you look at the preamp underneath this cover, you're going to see two big Nichicon capacitors, big ones. That's what you need, is big parts to get things quiet. And then they did something that I find shocking at $1,999. They use tube rectification. If you go look at other manufacturers and you look at their most expensive products, the ones that cost over $10,000, they're either going to use tube rectification or tube regulation. PrimaLuna not only does that, they do it dual mono. So there's two 5AR4 tubes. Why do you want to use that? Because tubes are actually quieter than solid state rectification. But companies don't want to do it because it costs too much. To do this, you need the tube socket, you need resistors, you need a 5-volt winding out the transformer, you have to have the tube. It's going to cost them probably $35 for each tube, I'm guessing, in parts, right? Plus labor. Instead, they use like an FET, $2. You're never going to know because you're not going to think about this stuff. But that's why you cannot trust anybody. Don't trust what I say. Go use Google Images. Before you buy a preamp, I don't want you to buy it until you go to Google, type in the model number of what it is, go to Google Images, and find a picture of it opened up. And you say to yourself, yeah, but I'm not an engineer. You don't have to be an engineer. If it's empty, it's empty. And then they come up with this whole BS line. They go, well, yeah, but our products are a minimalist design. That is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. This whole thing about minimalist design. Okay, why do you do that? Well, because it sounds better with fewer parts. No, it's going to sound best with the right number of parts and the right design. I mean, if you're going to make it minimalist, that means it has fewer parts, right? So it should be cheaper. You shouldn't be charging more for it. There is no fairy dust in high-end audio. Avoid it. So, dual mono, tube rectified, toroidal power transformer. Look at the back here. Right up in the front, there's a controller board that operates these things. These are hermetically sealed relays. So many preamps use a selector switch, a wiper switch. What's wrong with that? It's going to be like your parents' TV set. Remember those? The knob, and your dad, you'd end up getting channel 5 and channel 7 bleeding into each other. Then Dad would have to pull the knob off. He'd have to spray tuner cleaner in that and go back and forth and try to clear it up. It's the same thing here. Wiper switches are wiper switches, and they can work just fine, but they don't turn off the other inputs completely. There's always bleed over, and they always deteriorate. Instead, PrimaLuna uses these. These are hermetically sealed relays made in Japan by Takamasawa. That's a division of Fujitsu. The reason they did that is when you select auxiliary 1, boom, it closes, giving you the best contact and the shortest signal path because it's right there. All the other relays are left open, so it acts as a gatekeeper to eliminate noise. But they did more. They added little resistors in here to each input to present a perfect high impedance to all of your source components because they like that. Now, it only cost them $1 each to do that, to add those resistors. But, you know, these big companies, especially the bigger companies, they fine-tune this stuff to the penny. I don't know of another company that spends the money to do that. So, you have 2 sets of line outs. This preamp has 10.8 dB of gain. Oh my God, I was so happy to see that. Listen to what I'm going to say. If you were to take your music streamer or your CD player and plug it directly into your amp without a preamp, it would play so loud it would blow you out of the room. When you use a preamp, you're not adding gain most all of the time. You're actually attenuating volume. So the problem is some preamps are going to have 27 dB of gain. I've seen even more than 30 dB of gain. When you have that much gain, you got to do something with it. And I'll tell you what happens. You end up with more thermal noise, and you end up with tube noise and tube microphony and tubes not lasting. That's why people say, no, I'd like to have tubes, but I owned one before and it was a pain. It does not have to be a pain. It has to be engineered right. The man that engineered this preamp was the chief engineer for Goldman in Switzerland, for God's sakes. Do you know what Goldman is? Have you ever seen a piece of Goldman? It's art. But it's so expensive, most people have never even seen one. It's a Swiss product and they are amazing. And the same guy, the person that engineered this, he is a real engineer. It uses a pair of 12AX7s and a pair of 12AU7s. It has an output impedance of 2,800 ohms. What does that mean? Listen, I'm going to explain it to you because people get confused about this. When you look at a preamp, a tube preamp, you have to look at the output impedance of it. And then you look at the input impedance of your power amp. The input impedance of your power amp should be 10 times or more than the output impedance. So this is 2,800 ohms. Your power amp should be 28,000 ohms or higher. That's 95% of the solid state amps out there will work with this beautifully. And it's every tube amp I've ever seen. They're going to typical solid state amp is going to have probably 50,000 ohms of input impedance. Almost all tube amps are going to be somewhere around 100,000 ohms. So don't worry about that. Like I said, it's a low gain design. It's as quiet as a church mouse. I'm going to say one more thing. The volume control is not a chip. Now, there are ways to make electronic volume controls that are elegant and beautiful that can sound good. I've seen it done before, but some companies that have really good reputations, I see them using chips that cost $2.50, and you can say what you want, they sound like chips. And it's not that they sound bad, they measure fine. There's just a slight electronic sheen to them. And I guess PrimaLuna could have done that, but they chose not to. And they would have saved a lot of money because this is like a $50 part. This is an Alps Blue Velvet potentiometer, and it's motorized. It's made in Japan, and it's analog, and it's built to last and track well. They didn't have to use that part. I see products that cost so much more money that use lesser parts, but that's always been what PrimaLuna is about. It has an amazing remote control. I mean, look at it. It's machined. I mean, that is the real deal. Then it's got neoprene rings on the ends to protect your furniture. You've got volume up and down. You've got muting and an input selector. Stunning. The chassis itself. Look, so many companies use flat black or flat silver. And if you go to a store and look at the edges of the transformer covers, you're going to see grinding marks in the metal. That's why they use a flat finish. Because if they did anything like this, they would have to have a much higher degree of quality of finish. This is 5 coats of hand-rubbed finish. It's like an automotive finish. Nobody does that. Same thing with the faceplate. It is absolute butter. The new Evolution products have new faceplates. It's got this wonderful tactile feel around the edges. Oh, and then there's a box in the back. For an optional, all the new Evolution products can use the optional internal phono stage. It's a moving magnet phono stage. I will say this, I am a believer in outboard phono stages. I don't think you should get something necessarily with a DAC built in because those can change. And the phono stage business is very, very competitive. It's a great phono stage, but if you're really an album freak, I'd probably get an outboard one. You know, if it's really important to you, because it's a competitive business and you can get some really good stuff without going crazy. But if you are just want to get something that's good, that's going to sound great, and you only have a moving magnet cartridge, it's going to do a great job. So there's a little box that's mounted to the bottom. You can add the phono stage later if you choose to do so. Look, $1,999, 31 pounds. Handmade with the best techniques. I mean, everything. I mean, things that you don't see in products that cost 10 grand. I have to applaud these people. Herman van den Dungen and I, because we've been working together for so long, we look at this as a cause. Because, you know, it's fine if you're some .com dude, right? You're some .com dude and you got lots of jack and you want to spend money on super expensive stuff. God bless you. I mean, that's great because I don't have a problem with it. But I do have a problem with this. If you don't want to spend $10,000, $20,000 on a preamp and you think you can't get something that's state-of-the-art, you are wrong. You are wrong. And that's what PrimaLuna is about. That's what the company has always been about. That's why magazine reviewers, look, don't buy because of a good review. There's no bad reviews. But I can tell you about reviewers that are using PrimaLuna as their reference. The most knowledgeable guys, there's another review coming out in TAS. My favorite reviewers at TAS and Stereophile, I don't want to name their names, maybe I should. Both of them are using PrimaLuna as their reference, and these are big guys that could call any manufacturer and say, oh yeah, I want to borrow your preamp and I'll write about it in my articles, and they'd be all over it. Both of them are using PrimaLuna because it's the real deal. Okay, so go to your local dealer, go to the website, go to the Vital Info tab on the PrimaLuna website, learn about how this stuff works. Make sure you get something for your money. Thanks for listening.